So we're looking at our final question in this Merchant Taylor specimen paper 1. Have a look on their website if you need to find it. We might have a link somewhere on our question page or on our YouTube page. And it says here, a ball is dropped and bounces up to a height that is 75% of the height from which it was dropped. It then bounces again to a height that is 75% of the previous height, and so on. How many bounces does it make before it bounces to a height that is less than 25% of the original height? Okay, 25% is quite a large chunk, right? Okay, so if we start off maybe here, this is where our ball is. Let's say it's hanging from some sort of string, or I'm not sure what. That doesn't look like a great string either. So let me get rid of that and do something like that. That's our ball, and it's going to be dropped, okay, from that height. When it drops, it goes all the way down, let's say to the floor, which is about here. And then it bounces up to, let's say, here, which is around about 75% of the original height. So the mistake that a lot of children will start thinking about is, oh, that means that in 3 goes it will be 25%. Okay. Firstly, it says less than 25% as well. Okay, so we're trying to work out how many bounces will the height be less than 25% of the original height. Okay, so that's quite a challenging question, but it's the final question. This is the original height. And so the first go, it loses 25% of its original height. But is it not saying how many bounces will it lose 25%? How many bounces will it be 25% of the original height? So we've got a long way to go, right? So then when it bounces again the second time round, when it bounces, so it goes up, so it goes down, goes up, then it goes down, then it's going to go up again, and that's going to be 75% of that. So something around here. Okay, so now we've lost some more, but we haven't lost 25% of the original amount. We've lost 25%, okay, of the new amount, 25% of the new height, because it says here somewhere, a ball is dropped, bounces up to height 75% of the height from which it was dropped. It then bounces again to a height that is 75% of the previous height. Yeah, 75% of the previous height. This was up to here. It was the previous height. So 75% of this height. Okay, so that's what we've got there. So that means that it's 75% of 75%. Okay, if we work in fractions, 3/4 of 3/4, what's that going to give us? That's going to give us 9/16. Okay, 9/16. Can we simplify that any further? If we divide by 2, no, 3, no, that's about it, right? Okay, so 3/4 of 3/4 is going to be 9/16. So now we are at a height that is 9/16 of the original height. 8/16 would have been half. So we're just below half. So, sorry, just above half, excuse me. Okay, 8/16 is me about here. That new line that I've just made, that's about 8/16. It's about halfway, possibly. Doesn't look like halfway, but let's say that's halfway. And 9/16 is just a bit, just a little bit, 1/16 greater than half of the original height. Now we've got 9/16 of the original height, so we can work out 9/16, 3/4 times 9/16 of the original height, and therefore 3 times 9, 27, 4 times 10 is 40, 4 times 6 is going to be 24, so 40 plus 24 is 64, so 27/64. Can we do anything about that? Not really. Okay, but 27/64 is that 25% of the original height? It's not, right? So 27/64 is about there. 27/64. We're trying to work out if it's less than 25%. How would I do that? Well, we know that if something goes a half, then the numerator will always be a half. So for example, 25 out of 50 is always going to be a half of the denominator. Same as 25% is going to be a quarter of the denominator. So 64 divided by 4 is going to be 16. So this is not 16 or less. And so that's not going to be 25% either. So that's how many bounces is that so far? That's 1 bounce, 2 bounces, 3 bounces now. And then you're going to have another 4th bounce, which will get us here. Okay, and this 4th bounce will be 27/64, 3/4 of 27/64. And so now we're going into it quite heavily. And so we've got 3 times 27, 4 times 64, which we get 3 times 27 is going to be 81. And 4 times 64, 6, 12, 18, 20, 240 plus 16. 240 plus 16 is 256. So 81, 256. So this is 81, 256 of the original amount. Now, have a look. This is the last question of this paper. Is worth 2 marks. Quite a bit to do here. It's only worth 2 marks. So is there a more simpler way? There may possibly be actually a simpler way than what I'm doing. I'm working with fractions. Maybe percentages would have been easier. So we'll have a look at that as well. So 81, 256 is 81, 256 a quarter of or less of 256? 81 times 4 is going to be 300 and something. Okay, 8, 16, 24, 32, 324, then 324. And so this is less than 324. So I think actually on the 5th go, on the 5th bounce, we will find, I am hoping, that 3/4 of 81,256 will give me 243. So now we can see that 3/4 times 81,256 means that we have a number, the numerator, less than a quarter of the denominator, which means that it's going to be less than 25%. And so the 5th go, took a while to get there, but the 5th go, the 5th bounce is when we actually get to a height that's less than 25% of the original. So we've got the 5th value here. Okay, so in the last video, we looked at this question, and I looked at it in a very visual way in terms of drawing the bounces and so forth, right? So if we think about it more simplistically, we know that the first bounce will have 3/4 of the original amount, which is 3/4. The second bounce will be 3/4 of that, so 3/4 times 3/4. And so we can do a quick calculation. That's going to be 9/16. That's not going to be 25%. Okay, or less, right? Because that's going to be 9/16 of the total, which is around about nearly half, or 1/16 away from a half. And so that's not enough. So we're going to have to multiply that by 3/4 again. So we've got 3 times 3 times 3, 3 cubed, which is 27. And we've got 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64. So we've got 9/16, we've got 27/64. Again, that's not what we want, because 27/64 is now less than a half, because 32/64 is a half, but it's not 25% or lower, because we know this number has to be more than 4 times smaller, if that makes sense. Well, 64 divided by 4, whatever that value is, 16 in this case, it has to be 16 or less for this to be 25%, sorry. So it has to be less than 16, the numerator, for it to be 25% of the original amount. So that's still not the case, so we're going to have to multiply that by 3/4 as well. So we've got 27 times 3, 64 times 3, and then we work out that actually that is going to be 25 times 3 is going to be 75. 2 times 3 is going to be 6. So it's going to be 81 over 64 times 4 in this case. 64 times 4 is going to be 60 times 4. 6, 12, 18, 24, 240. Plus 4 times 4 is 16. 240 plus 16 is 256. 240 times, add 16, sorry, is only 256. Okay, so we've got 256 now. So 81 and 256. Is 81 a quarter of 256? 80, 160, 240. No, it's around about a third, which is about 33%. So it's still too high. So we're going to have to go for a fifth bounce. When we multiply 81 over 256 by 3/4, then we're going to get a final one, hopefully. 81 times 3, 80 times 3 is 240. 1 times 3 is 3, 243. 243 all over. 256 times 4. 250 times 4 is 1,000. 6 times 4 is 24. So 1,024. And therefore we can see that actually 1,024, 1,000, a quarter of 1,000 is 250. And so we've got 243 and 1,024. That means this is going to be less than a quarter. And therefore the fifth bounce, on the fifth bounce, we are less than a quarter of the original height. Hopefully that made sense. A lot of work to do here. You had to kind of think about it, and you had to be really confident with multiplication of fractions, but also what that actually means. It's no good that you know how to multiply fractions, but you've got to understand that when we do this, this means we're finding 3/4 of 3/4. Multiplying this by 3/4 again, it means we're finding 3/4 of what 3/4 of 3/4 is, right? And so forth.